Belief is not the goal. No one has to approve. No one has to agree before you move. Approval is not stable. Approval changes. Approval disappears when it costs too much. But memory does not change. Memory is fixed. Memory is what survives the room, what stays after the moment clears, what cannot be revised once it is set. Build for the record, not for the nod. You do not need faith from the room. You need something on the record. The nod feels real in the moment. The record is what outlasts the moment. The record does not need a mood. The record does not need a generous room. The record is just what happened. Fixed, real, unchangeable. Counting who is on the side ends here. Count what is being left behind. Build things so undeniable that silence becomes the only honest response. Not silence from respect, silence from having nothing left to say. Work at that level, the level that makes doubt embarrassing, the level that makes the loudest critics go quiet, not because an argument was won, because the evidence is in. The goal is not to convince, the goal is results, permanent, documented, results that need no defense. Because the ones who doubted will have to say the name, and the name will carry weight, weight the work gave it, not weight borrowed from anyone. That is the target, not belief, the record. Every place that could not hold, every moment the floor gave out, every time going down was documented. None of that dissolved. It sits, it waits, it accumulates. But weakness is not just a failure log. Weakness is data, and data can be used. Every fall showed exactly where the break was. No one teaches that. Failure does. And the failure already happened, already paid for, cannot be unpaid. Weakness that is confronted does not stay weakness. It converts into the specific knowledge of where the break was, into the exact location of what needs to be built, into precision. The difference between people who stay down and people who collect on it is one thing. One sees the fall as the end of the story. The other sees the fall as the beginning of the information. So go back to the exact place that gave out, not away from it, to it. Stay until it holds, until the thing that once broke is the thing done without effort. That is the return. That is what the weakness was worth. The fall was expensive. The price was real, already paid. The only waste is not collecting what it bought. And the debt is not small, so the return will not be small. The laughter was real, not assumed, not imagined, heard. And the fall was real too. The floor gave out. The moment was witnessed. The sound that followed was laughter. That moment is fixed now, cannot be revised, cannot be argued. It happened. And in that moment, a decision was made. Not spoken, not announced, made. To let the laughter be the last loud thing. The fall was documented. The rise does not need an announcement. Because laughter does not survive evidence. Bring enough evidence, and the laughter has nothing left to stand on. It just stops. Not from shame, not from apology, from the simple fact that something happened that was declared impossible and happened anyway. Do not rush the arrival. Do not preview it. Do not warn anyone. Just arrive. Arrive at the level where nothing is left to say, where the room goes quiet, not from respect, not yet, from the absence of any counter, any rebuttal, any remaining angle, just the result and the silence that settles around it. The lower the fall, the heavier the quiet when the arrival lands, where no one expected it, where the laughter once lived. The silence does not need an announcement. It just arrives right behind the result.
At some point, the explaining became the problem. Every time an explanation was offered, the room heard doubt. Not because the words were wrong, because words are not proof. Words say what might happen. Results say what did. And that is the entire difference. Results need no defender, no context, no room in a generous mood, no one standing beside the work saying what it really means. Results land whether the room is ready or not. An explanation requires agreement. Someone has to decide the explanation is valid. Someone has to be willing, and willing is not guaranteed. But a result requires nothing. No willingness, no open mind, no charity from the room. A result is self-contained. It does not ask, it does not wait, it does not care about the mood in the room. The moment the explaining ends, the work becomes the only sentence in the conversation. So the question is not how to explain better. The question is what is being built that will make every explanation irrelevant. What is being constructed that will not need a voice behind it, that will just stand, be read correctly by anyone in any room? Build that thing. The thing that speaks when the room is empty, when no history is provided, when no context is given, just the result, standing alone, needing nothing, saying everything. Being underestimated is not an insult, it is a position. When the room decides less is available, when the math is wrong, when the weight assigned is too low, that gap is the advantage. Not a problem, an advantage. Low expectations create an opening that high ones never will. High expectations create watchers. Watchers create pressure. Pressure changes behavior, makes the work self-conscious. But low expectations create absence. No one is tracking. No one is clocking. No one is positioned to intercept. So move quietly, without the weight of scrutiny, without having to perform, without having to be measured at every step. And when the arrival comes, it is a surprise to everyone except the one who built it. Because the calculation was wrong, and the wrong math bought time. Every day the expectation stayed low was a day the work moved without interference. The room corrects itself eventually. It always does. And when it does, the gap between expected and arrived is the clearest measurement of the work done. Do not fix the underestimation. Do not announce the correction. Let the expectation stay low until the result is so far past it that the correction happens on its own, without help, without announcement. The result does it automatically, and the room never sees it coming because it was never supposed to. Anger is energy, raw, loud, real. And anger that stays loud stays expensive. Every hour spent expressing it
is an hour the work does not move. Every scene made in anger benefits no one. But anger does not have to stay loud. It can be redirected, not denied, not buried without direction, redirected. Anger that gets loud burns the energy. Anger that gets quiet builds the edge. The edge is sharper because of what it cost, not in spite of it. Every moment that felt like injustice, every door that closed hard, every room that delivered a no. Those moments became direction, the exact coordinates of what needs to change, the exact location to apply force. Because anger without direction wastes. Anger with direction sharpens. And sharp is dangerous in a way that loud never is. Loud announces itself. Loud gives warning. Loud lets the room prepare. Sharp arrives before the warning. Sharp does the work before the reaction. Sharp does not need the room to know it is coming. Do not kill the anger. Redirect the noise. Hold the edge. Let the edge go to work. In the exact place the anger pointed, with the exact force the anger provided, without a single wasted sound.
When the reacting ends, the room misreads it. The room sees absence. The room sees withdrawal. The room sees defeat. None of that is correct. Silence is not the end. Silence is not agreement. Silence is not surrender. Silence is the most disciplined choice available. Because silence does not waste energy. Silence saves it. Every response not given, every argument not entered, every debate not had, that energy goes somewhere. It goes into the plan, into the preparation, into the building of something that makes the debate irrelevant. Because a plan still forming does not need an audience. A plan still building does not need input from the room, does not need validation, does not need anyone's timing. It needs time and quiet. The ones who went quiet before the arrival did not go quiet from having nothing left, did not go quiet because the room won. Quiet because the room was no longer the destination. The destination was being built in private, in the hours no one could see, in the work that had no audience, and quiet was the environment the work needed. So, if the room reads the silence as weakness, good, let it read, while the work finishes what it started.
At some point, performing the pain became a second wound. Every time the story got told for the room, something opened again. Not fully, but enough. Enough to slow everything. Enough to keep the wound in use. Enough to extend the process. Because healing needs a different environment. Not an audience, not a reaction, not witnesses holding the moment open. Pain performed is pain extended. Pain processed in private becomes capacity. Capacity is not named in the moment, but it is felt later, when the work moves differently, when the weight is not as heavy, when the thing that used to stop everything no longer registers. That is what private healing produces. Not a story, not a moment, not something to show the room, something functional. The healed place that now holds weight, that can be pressed on and does not crack. No one saw the process. No one marked the milestone. No one was in the room when it changed. And that is exactly right. Because work done in private does not need a witness to be real. It just needs to happen. And what happens in private shows up in public
without origin story, without explanation, just present, just undeniable.
The seats are real, not a reward, not a gift, a fact. The distance between a person and the result is proportional to how hard that person worked against it. The ones who declared it impossible will stand furthest from what was built, not as punishment, as a natural outcome. Because proximity to a result requires participation in the building, and the ones who declared the building impossible did not lay a single moment of work into it. So the seat is small, the seat is far, the view is partial, and the view is still going to be real, because the result is real, because the result is final, because there is no revision. The outcome is in, the structure is standing, and the distance is permanent. No bitterness needed, no announcement required, no speech about who doubted, just the arrangement, self-organized by the choices each person made when the building was in progress, when the outcome was uncertain, when adding to the doubt was the easier option. The ones who chose doubt already made that choice. The seating is the result of a decision already made, and now it is visible and permanent. And the smallest seat has a very clear view of exactly what doubt cost.
Every moment of silence was a deposit, not a loss, a deposit. Every response not given, every argument not entered, every reaction withheld, every scene avoided. That is position building, compounding over time. And position is not absence. Silence with intention is not absence. It is the building of weight. Absence has no direction. Position knows exactly where it is aimed. And when the moment arrives, when the work is built, when the result is undeniable, the voice returns. Not louder, not angrier, heavier. Because it has been quiet. Because what stands behind it now is not just words. It is a record, a body of work. Results that did not need the voice to exist. That is what gets used now. Not the volume, the weight. Weight built over time in silence, without acknowledgement, without applause. That weight lands differently. In a room that was not expecting it, in a room that was told nothing was coming, the delivery of that weight is the moment the position is cashed in. And it requires no warning, no announcement. The weight just lands in a room with no response prepared because nothing was ever supposed to arrive. And then it does.
Every dismissal, every word built to reduce, every sentence designed to set a hard limit on what was available, none of it did what it was built to do. It did something else. The words meant to stop the building became part of the building. Not because the words were not heard, every one was heard. Not because the words did not land. Some landed hard. But landing hard is not the same as determining direction. A word heard and used is no longer just a word. It is input, and input can be redirected. Every person who said "not ready" showed exactly what ready looks like in that room, and that picture became the target. Every person who named the limit gave a precise location to surpass, and surpassing it required nothing from the original speaker. No acknowledgement, no credit given, just the arrival at the point the words declared unreachable. The arrival is the response, complete. No elaboration, no speech. The work says it. The position says it. The result says it. And the original words, the ones built to stop all of it, are buried under everything built above them, fixed in place by the weight of what came after.
Some arguments are not worth entering, not because the energy is not there, because the conclusion is already written. The room made a decision before the evidence was visible, before the result existed, before the work was complete. A decision made before the evidence is not a conclusion, it is a prediction. And predictions get corrected by results, not by arguments. So what does entering the argument change? What does winning the debate produce? The outcome decides, not the argument. The only move is to build the outcome, while the other side holds the debate. Let the debate go. Let the prediction stand. Let the room feel settled in its wrong answer, because a wrong answer with no pushback stays comfortable, and comfort makes the correction hit harder when the evidence finally arrives. Not arriving to correct, not arriving to argue, just arriving. And the arrival does the correcting without assistance. While the debate is still warm, while the prediction is still circulating, while the room is still confident, the work does not pause. The work is not slowed. The work continues. And when the result is in, the debate is not won. The debate is irrelevant. There is a difference, and the difference matters more than any argument ever could. A scream tells the room exactly where to find you. A scream tells the room what landed. A scream tells the room something is there. That is information given away, free, without asking. Silence gives nothing. Silence says nothing about the location, nothing about what landed, nothing about the next move, nothing about the current state. The scream gives the room a map. The silence leaves nothing to navigate by. And a room with no map guesses. And guessing costs energy, costs attention, costs the mental space that could have gone towards something real. So while the room burns energy guessing, the work continues, uninterrupted, undisclosed. And the confusion builds, not from complexity, not from strategy, just from the absence of signal. Because the room was built to track the reaction, and the reaction was removed. So the tracking mechanism finds nothing, and the room is left building its own story with no data, no signal, no confirmation, just the silence and whatever the room fills it with. Let the room fill it. Let it construct an answer, because every answer built without real data is wrong, and wrong preparation meets the result unprepared every time, without exception. And that gap between preparation and reality is where the position already sits.
There was a moment when the name was everywhere, in every room where limits were being assigned, in every conversation about what was possible, every discussion about what could not be done. And then the name went quiet, not removed, not defeated, withdrawn. Withdrawn from the conversation so the arrival would land without warning. Because presence in a conversation of doubt gives the doubt power over the expectation. Every mention of the name in the context of limits trained the room to expect less, set the ceiling lower, lowered the prediction. But an absence creates no expectation at all. The room stops tracking, the room stops measuring, the room moves past it, and the work continues in that absence, without measurement,
without interference, without the weight of being observed. Until the arrival is not a question, until the arrival is so total that the story the room built during the absence cannot survive contact with it. The room was wrong in every specific detail, in every particular projection. And that kind of wrong does not leave the room quickly. It stays. It lives in the space between what was predicted and what arrived instead. That space is not comfortable for anyone who predicted wrong, and it should not be.
Patience is not passive. Patience is observation. Patience is the act of watching without announcing the watch, collecting, noting, storing. Every move made by the room during the period of apparent absence is information. Patience without observation is waiting. Patience with observation is preparation. And preparation changes the arrival completely. An arrival without information is a guess. Guesses fail at the worst possible moments against the most prepared opposition. But an arrival built on months of observation, on understanding how the room moves, on tracking the patterns, the habits, the assumptions, the places the room forgets to guard. That arrival is not a guess. That arrival is calculated. Every day of silence, every day of apparent absence was a day of data. More happened in the silence than had happened in the noise. Because noise attracts attention. Attention requires management. Management costs time. And time spent managing attention is time not spent on the work. But silence costs nothing. And in the silence, the full picture became clear. The full landscape became readable. And now the arrival is not blind. It knows exactly where to apply pressure, exactly what the room forgot to protect, exactly where the gap is, because the patience revealed all of it.
There was a period of waiting. Waiting for validation. Waiting for the room to signal, go. That period ended. Not from anger, not from impatience, from recognition. The room was never going to give the signal. Because the signal was never the room's to give. Growth is not a gift from the room. Growth is not dependent on permission. Growth does not wait for the conditions to be perfect. Growth is the act of moving, regardless of conditions, regardless of the signal, regardless of whether the room approves, or is ready, or is watching, because the window does not extend for the permission debate. Every day spent asking is a day the work does not happen. Every moment spent seeking approval is a moment the building pauses. And paused building does not catch up. It just compounds the gap. So the waiting ended. The asking ended. The seeking ended. And the work started. Not when the room was ready, when the direction became clear. Not perfectly clear, clear enough to move. And movement is the only way to make the picture clearer. Move without permission. Move without the room's agreement. Discover that the room was never necessary to reach where the work was always going.
Every distraction is a bid for the attention, and the attention is finite. It does not replenish on demand. Every argument entered, every irrelevant conversation held, every piece of noise absorbed costs. Not the conversation, not the opinion, the work. Only the work. Because noise produces more noise, and the louder it gets, the more it invites. So the cut has to be deliberate, not passive, not gradual, deliberate. What goes? The argument that does not move the work, the conversation that does not clarify the direction, the habit that does not build the capacity, gone. What stays? The work, the skill, the discipline, the precision. Because precision is the removal of everything unnecessary until what remains is the exact edge, the exact capacity, the exact output needed. And a sharp edge produces results. A dull edge produces effort without return. So the sharpening is the work. The removal is the work. Deciding what stays is as important as building what stays. The only conversation worth having is the one inside the work itself, between where things are now and where they are going. Everything else is noise, and noise gets cut. The edge does not negotiate with noise, it just removes it. No announcement, no preview, no trailer, no preamble. The arrival does not require the room to be seated, does not require a countdown, does not require permission from anyone. It just lands. And the landing is the announcement. The announcement is the proof. The proof is already complete before the room forms an opinion. Because previewing the arrival benefits the people who need to prepare against it. And why do that? Why give the opposition time to organize? Why give the doubt a chance to form a strategy? Why give the room time to adjust? The arrival should be a fact before the room has time to decide how to feel about it. Build in private. Move without disclosure. Arrive without warning. And the room is left with two options: acknowledge it or not. Both options end the same way. The fact stands. No argument slows a fact. No doubt revises a fact. No prediction changes what already arrived. The work is the fact. The result is the fact. And the fact lands when it lands. Without warning, without courtesy, without waiting for the room to be ready. That is the only way to arrive.
The original story was written by the room. The character was established. The ceiling was assigned. The ending was decided. And the ending was not generous. Small, contained, done. But the room wrote its story, not the story. The room wrote its prediction. What gets built from work is the record. And the record does not need the room's participation, does not need anyone to pick up a pen for it, does not need agreement. The record builds itself, one action at a time, one decision at a time, one undeniable output at a time. And the record does not reference the original story, does not correct it, does not argue with it, does not ask for a revision. It just exists as evidence, as the next chapter, built without permission. And when it lands, it does not make the original story wrong. It makes the original story irrelevant. Because irrelevant is more complete than wrong. Wrong can still argue. Irrelevant has nothing to say. The room can hold its original story if it wants, forever, while the record is already past the ending the room assigned, already building towards something the room never included in its draft. already 3 chapters ahead. The loudest move is rarely the final move. The loudest moment is rarely the deciding moment. Most endings are quiet. A decision made without announcement, a position reached without sound, a result locked in before the room finishes its sentence. Checkmate is not an event, it is a conclusion built one move at a time. Every move quiet, every position deliberate, every decision made with the ending in mind. Not the dramatic ending, the correct one. The one where the outcome is already determined before the final move is visible. Because the final move is never the real move. The real move was made earlier, without an audience, when the result was not yet visible, when no one thought it mattered. That is the actual move. The one no one watched because it did not look like anything yet. And the position built from that move decided everything. Long before the result was visible, long before the room ran out of responses, long before the silence arrived, the work had already finished the conversation. No celebration required, no declaration, no announcement. Just the position, just the result, just the work, standing in the room saying everything that needs to be said without a single word from you. That is the record built right. Share this with one person who needs to hear it.